Morning, Joydeep da. Joydeep sir.
Huh? Morning.
A very good wintry morning where we will have some sprung rhythm, some inscape, some religion, some expression, and some impression.
Good morning, Jaydeep sir.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You please join. I will share it out with everybody a- at, as per your instructions, sir. Okay, sir. You please join, sir. Okay, sir. Okay.
Can you hear me, Saika?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Uh,
Sir, please open
so,
your camera, sir.
okay.
Sir, we can't see you. Please open your camera.
Wait, I'm like switch. Yeah. Am I visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So, a very warm welcome to everybody who is present here. Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome to today's special lecture program organized by the Department of English, Coach Bihar Panjamama University on innovative expressions in G.M. Hopkins poetry, The Man of Faith and the Poet of Nature, a special lecture to be delivered by Dr. Dipak Kumar Doley. We have with us Dr. Sonav Samazdar, the head of the Department of English of Coach Bihar Panjamama University. I would like to request sir to please give us the permission to begin with this program and say a few kind words. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, and thank you, Dr. Dilip Kumar Doley. Thank you also, Joydeep sir,
Thank you, sir.
uh, all of the teachers, students, research scholars here. Uh, I apologize to everyone for going beyond the ritual of a special lecture. I welcome our invited lecturer here, but I apologize that maybe I will take 4 to 5 minutes going beyond the ritual of just declaring the session open, because the ambience of all the college teachers joining here, my seniors and my scholars, and Dr. Sarkar's relentless efforts to not to go the Saturdays wasted also, uh, uh, excites me to speak a few words here. Uh, the 19th century, uh, a very long century, I think longer than 18th century, although the 18th century is called long 18th century, is a very heterogeneous. And there were forces of surfacing and resurfacing. Uh, this was the age of the Tractarian movement and the Oxford movement. And this was also the age of the Lake District poets, where two male poets stole the diaries of Dorothy Wordsworth to become very famous. And this was also the age of evolutionism in natural selection and survival of the fittest coming to biological as well as social theories. This was also the age of losing faith, and this was also the age of recovering, retrieving faith. Now, I am very interested about, first and foremost, before that, I would thank the uh, respected invited speaker and our organizer, Dr. Sarkar, also, for choosing the title or the thematic nomenclature of this lecture so carefully. Expressions are what flow from the object of the substrate to the discursive limb, and impressions are what come from the cognitive imposition of the discourse maker. And Hopkins was definitely the single most innovator of what I would roughly call, with working definitions of era, Victorian times, in terms of matching melody with message. I mean, I do not teach 19th century, and actually, I'm a man of film studies. But during my honors days, what made me awestruck was a couple of innovations by Hopkins in a single poem, The Pied Beauty. Variegatedness or heterogeneity, that which we call postmodern today, that which call pluralistic democracy in political science, and that which we call multiplicity of understanding as per the reader's perspective, as per the post-deconstructive era. Hopkins was a man who ignited it by variegatedness, but somewhere this heterogeneity, in order to communicate and in order to have a community, this variegatedness, this heterogeneity has to be anchored, and Hopkins invented two things for it. One in the sonic realm or the phonemic realm, and the other in the realm of the what we can call the substrate, the meant ortho, shabdartho. The first one is sprung rhythm. Glory be to God. And Kaji Nazrul Islam, a proto-communist Islamic poet of joint Bengal, saying chol chol re chol. উচ্চারণের মাধুর্যে or in the realm of melody or prosody কোনো ডিফারেন্স নেই, এই রিদম ছাড়া এই মিনিং কমিউনিকেটেড হতো না। উইদাউট দিস utterance, without this sonic innovative expression of sprung rhythm, the content wouldn't match the signifier. There wouldn't have been any anchorage and communication wouldn't have taken place. And Hopkins just made me feel like Laka facing the sublime, which cannot be symbolized adequately. And Hopkins symbolized the real adequately. This is a remarkable expression. And the second one is the inscape. আমি একবারই চেস্টনাট দেখেছি পৃথিবীতে, খুব ছোটবেলা রিমোট মেমোরি, অ্যাংলো ইন্ডিয়ান পাড়ায় পার্ক স্ট্রিটের থেকেও একটু এগিয়ে মির্জা গালিবের দিকে, ফ্রেশ ফায়ার কোল চেস্টনাট, কয়লা যখন আগুনে পড়ে তার যে লাল, তার যে উত্তাপ, তার যে ফোটনিক কোয়ালিটি, অপটিক কোয়ালিটি, অকিউলার কোয়ালিটি, সেটা শব্দে ধরা পড়েছে। এই ইনোভেটিভ এক্সপ্রেশনের আমি আর কোনো 19th সেঞ্চুরি পোয়েটের ভেতরে কোনো সাযুজ্য বা সাদৃশ্য পাইনি। So I declare this special lecture open. I welcome once more Dr. Dipak Kumar Doley, and I thank once more Dr. Saikat Sarkar for holding this type of, holiday, what to say, events. And I thank also senior professors of the affiliated colleges and also colleges from other universities like University of North Bengal. For example, we have Joydeep sir here, the scholars, the students, everyone. I thank everyone and I invite you towards a session that you will not forget, and you will not forget Hopkins. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Before we begin, I would like to formally introduce our invited speaker. Dr. Dipak Kumar Doley is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of English, Dibrugarh University, Dibrugarh, since March 2011. He did his MA in English Literature from the Department of English, Guwahati University, Guwahati, with specialization in American Literature. He has obtained his PhD degree for his doctoral thesis on representations of the marginalized female voices in select partition fiction from India and Pakistan from Assam University. He has also so far edited a number of books, including Partition of India, Memory, Trauma, and Representation, Modernism and Postmodernism, Reflections and Speculations, Gender and Women's Studies, Interdisciplinary Approaches and Perspectives, Ethnic Culture, Identity and Conflict, Problems and Prospects, Human Rights, Security and Justice, Recent Trends and Approaches, Literature, Culture, Society, Multidisciplinary Perspectives, Rethinking Ecology and Environment, and Bloomingdale's An Anthology of English Poetry, Prose, and Short Stories. His areas of interest include partisan studies, modern poetry, post-colonial literature, American poetry, and Indian drama. Thank you, sir, very much for accepting the invitation. Over to you, sir. You can now begin with your deliberations. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Saikat. I think I'm audible to all of you.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So I just shared the PPT with you. I think if you can share it with your scholars and students, I think that will be
just give me
beneficial for them.
Okay, sir. Just a moment, sir.
So as Sir has already introduced in his inaugural speech, the topic of today's lecture, innovative expressions in Gerard Manley Hopkins's poetry. So here, I think the most important term in the title itself is the word innovative, because we are going to focus on how Hopkins made certain innovations in the field of writing poetry, and how he moved away from the conventional style of writing, not only in terms of his language, but also in terms of his selection of subjects, as well as other factors in poetry writing. So before I start the lecture, I'd like to introduce Hopkins with, I think most of our participants are students here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So as I got shared the syllabus curriculum with me, I could see that there were 2 poems by Hopkins in your syllabus, Pied Beauty and Felix Randall, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so our students can also have their questions if you have anything on these 2 poems, and any kind of observations that you want to express yourself during this lecture. So before that, I would just like to introduce you to the poet himself, Gerard Manley Hopkins. He was born in 1844 in Stratford, England, and educated at Balliol College, Oxford. And he converted himself to Catholicism under the influence of John Henry Newman, and later became a Jesuit priest. And this is very important for us because he believed, as a man of religion and as a man of trust, he believed that being a poet is something that is about personal fame. And being a priest, he was not supposed to go after or run after personal fame. That's why he decided not to publish his poems during his lifetime. And it is a very interesting fact about Hopkins, that all his poems were published posthumously by one of his closest friends, Robert Bridges. It was published posthumously in 1918. So he renounced poetry for several years, but resumed blending spirituality with innovative poetics. And the 2 most important traits that we notice in his poetry is the blending of spirituality and innovative poetic techniques. So these 2 are something that we need to remember, that how we can be innovative and at the same time we can also maintain some amount of spirituality in our writing. That is what Hopkins did in his career as a poet. And so posthumously his poems were published in 1918, and his key works are the one you have in your syllabus. Pied Beauty is one of the most famous poems by Hopkins. Then we have Wind Hour, another important and very interesting poem by Hopkins. And there is one very famous poem, God's Grandeur. Then we also have this famous poem, The Wreck of the Deutschland. There are several others, but these are the major works. And obviously, Felix Rendel is also one of them. Next slide is about the hallmarks of Hopkins's innovation, how we can say that he was an innovative poet. Break from Victorian conventions. While most Victorian poets focused on narrative or moral didacticism, Hopkins experimented with form and rhythm. And that is what Sir just said in his speech, that sprung rhythm is something that we need to remember as far as Hopkins's innovative style of writing is concerned. And the rhythm that we call as sprung rhythm is very common, like it's very similar to our day-to-day rhythm. And it is also a rhythm that was used in the Old English prosody. Old English, I think all of you know, or the Anglo-Saxon literature or prosody, where we have always, like consistently, we have the first syllable as a stressed one. First syllable is always stressed, and that stressed syllable or the first syllable which is stressed may be followed by any number of unstressed syllables. It can go even up to 4 unstressed syllables. Usually in like other rhythm, normal rhythm, we have maximum 2 to 3 unstressed syllables. After that, again, we have another foot where we have one more stressed syllable. But here, one stressed syllable can be followed by up to 3, not just 2, but up to 3 unstressed syllables. That is how the foot division is made. Okay, so the first syllable of a foot is always stressed. In other rhythm, it is sometimes it is unstressed stressed, sometimes it is stress unstressed. So that is how it varies. But in Hopkins's case, sprung rhythm, it always begins with a stressed syllable. That is what we call sprung rhythm. Emphasis on sensory experience, poetry as a means to capture the thisness. Thisness is what we call the inscape in his language, inscape of his writings. Inscape is this means the uniqueness, this that makes it different from that. So why we call that this is a bird? Because this bird is different from a cow or a dog or whatever it is. So similarly, a dog is different from a cow. A cow is different from a tiger. A tiger is different from a lion. So that is how things are unique in themselves, in itself. So every creation of God, Hopkins believed that every creation of God, whether it's a huge one or a small one, whatever it is, has its own uniqueness, has its own individuality that makes it special in its own way. And that speciality, that uniqueness that makes it different from the rest is what he calls inscape, or the thisness of the things. And that is what Hopkins always tried to emphasize through his writings. So basically he was trying to highlight the creative genius or the creative hand, how creative God is. That is what Hopkins tried to show through his writings. Because God has created so many things in this world, but all of them are so different from each other. There's no two things that are similar to each other. That is what makes God so great. So that is the inscape. So his innovations include sprung rhythm, I just mentioned, based on stressed syllables, always begins with a stressed syllable. Inscape, the unique inner quality of the objects. So everything, not just living beings, everything has its own unique inner quality. Even a fruit, an apple, a grape, strawberry, banana, mango, everything is so different from each other. So everything is so unique. That is what we call inscape. And instress is the force that connects inscape to the divine. So it's the same but different. If we call it is same but different, then we will refer to the inscape of the thing. And if we call it's different but same, then it will be the in stress. So different but same means what? So the divine presence, we can see the divine presence in everything in nature, in human beings, in animals, in birds, in fruits, in flowers, everywhere we can see the divine presence. God's creative hand is running in everything. God's creative presence is felt in everything God has created. So that is how things are unified. Although we are different, we are unified. Although we belong to different states, all of us are Indians. That is what we call the interest. But Assamese, we are Assamese, we have our own uniqueness. People from Bengal, they have their own uniqueness. People from Sikkim, they have their own uniqueness. So that uniqueness that makes them special and different from the rest, that is what we call the landscape. And the sense of Indianness that runs through all of us, that unites all of us, that binds all of us as being Indian, irrespective of our state, our language, our culture, that is what we call the interest. That's a force. That's a force that binds us together, that keeps us together, that holds us together. That is the incident. I have just given an example. And now let us go into details about what is sprung rhythm. Sprung rhythm definition is a metrical system where the number of stressed syllables is fixed, but unstressed syllables vary. So unstable syllables, it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be 4. It can be any number of unstressed syllables, but the first syllable is always stressed. And that is how there is a uniformity in terms of the stressed syllables, not in terms of the unstressed syllables, but in terms of the stressed syllables. We can see that there is a regular recurrence of stressed syllables in the lines of Hopkins's poems. Inspired by natural speech. So naturally, when we are speaking to each other, we generally use this kind of a speech where we start with a stressed syllable to give some more force or to give some more emphasis. And also it was found in the Old English prosody. And I just mentioned a little while ago. Impact breaks the monotony of regular rhythms. So when we bring in this sprung rhythm into our writing, it itself becomes different from the monotonous regular rhythm because it's so striking. It strikes our mind in the very first instance that we become aware of its uniqueness or its difference. Just like the inscape of things, that's the uniqueness of the things. Similarly, Hopkins's writings themselves also have this inscape in them because they are different from other poets of his times. Okay, that is how Hopkins is Hopkins. Hopkins is not Tennyson or Hopkins is not Arnold, but Hopkins is Hopkins. That is how he makes himself different from the rest. Breaks the monotony of regular rhythms, creating dynamic and intense expression. And that the regular recurrence of the stressed syllable also makes his writings very dynamic because of these stressed syllables appearing at a regular interval and always in the very first syllable of the foot makes the line of the poem sound very dynamic and very energetic. That is what sprung rhythm does in the lines of a poem. We have an example from this poem, The Wind Hour, one of the very most famous poems by Hopkins. I caught this morning's minion. And you can also notice, you notice the repetition of the more sound here. So this is alliteration. So alliteration is another important characteristic of Hopkins's poems. He repeats sounds. I caught this morning's minion, more. Kingdom of daylight's dauphin. Again, the sound is repeated. Dapple dawn drawn, 3 doors regularly. Dapple dawn drawn. So it's very dapple dawn drawn falcon. So he's talking about a particular bird, which we call the wind hour, because the bird, it hovers in the wind. It just flies very high up in the sky and it can remain there for a few seconds by hovering its wings on the wind. That's why it is known as wind hover. It hovers in the wind. And so he's just just as I told you that Hopkins glorifies every creation of God, and the wind hover is one of those beautiful creations of God. So what does he do? He's trying to highlight the uniqueness of the bird, how the bird is so special, what mastery the bird has, because this is not easy to hover in the wind and remain there for some time. It's not so easy. So he appreciates this particular quality of the bird. And that is how this poem is a dedication or a celebration of the greatness of the bird. And indirectly, it is also a celebration of the greatness of God. So I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin. So the bird has been referred to as the dauphin, daylight's dauphin, dapple dawn drawn falcon, natural yet musical, reflecting the falcon's flight. So this particular line is a reference to the beautiful and skillful flight of the bird, how it is drawn by the dapple color of the dawn. It is drawn by the dapple color of the dawn. So not just a bird, the dapple dawn is also praised here. And he has used these terms for the bird, daylight's dauphin. So in the early morning, the bird comes out and flies high up in the sky and hovers there. This is the point. If you go through the poem, we'll get into this in detail. Then we have these two more terms, inscape and instress. I just mentioned them. Let us go into them into details. So inscape is the unique essence of a being or object. So as I just told you, it is not only about living beings, it is also about an object. So even if Hopkins uses these terms in the case of God's creations, so even if we look at these man-made things, mobile phone, the laptop, whatever it is, everything has its own speciality. Everything is different from the rest. That's why it has its own identity. Okay. Every race, every caste, every community, every language, every culture, they have their own uniqueness. There are a lot of like qualities that makes it so special. That speciality is actually the inscape. That uniqueness is the inscape. The unique essence of a being or an object, unrepeatable and distinct. And you cannot repeat that uniqueness. You cannot repeat it and recreate it as it is. Even if we do it, it will be a duplicate. It will not be the original. If I try to create something that God has created, my creation will be a repetition of what God has already done. So I can never be the original creator. Okay? So it is so distinct, it is so spatial, and it is also very unrepeatable. And it captures the individuality and the divine creation. So that is how things have their own individuality, and that is how we have to accept that divine presence is always there in every object of nature, every creation of nature, every creation of God. Instress is the energy or force that conveys inscape to the mind and connects all things to God. So we know that this is different from the rest, that is different from the rest, but all these objects of nature, all these creations of God are somehow they are connected to God, because God is present in all of them. This is what we call the instress. The unifying, it's a force. Instress is a force that unifies things that are different from each other. In the classroom, we have so many students, 40, 50, 60 students sitting in the class. They are so different from each other. But there is a sense of unity. There is a sense of belongingness that all of us belong to this class. All of us belong to this department. All of us belong to this university. And that sense of belongingness unites us. We feel one. So that force, that is a unifying force that keeps us together, that binds us together. And that is what we call the in-stress of the things. So there is an example from the poem that you have in your syllabus, by beauty. All things counter, opposite, counter, original, spare, strange. So he has focused on things that are so different from each other. Counter, black, white, darkness, light, day, night, animals, birds, human beings. So we are so different. Okay. Counter, original, spare, strange. It celebrates the variety in nature, showing God's creativity. So how creative God can be, how God's creativity can be felt in every creation of God. That is what Hopkins is trying to highlight through his writings. So I hope I'm clear enough to all my dear students. If you
Yes,
have
sir.
any
Yes, sir.
problems, you can just remind me, or you can just call me, inform me. Okay,
Okay,
in the
sir.
middle of my lecture, no, there's no problem with that. Or you can also write in this message box. So your queries are always welcome. Your observations are always welcome.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. So then we have another important aspect of his writings. That is, I just mentioned a little while ago. That is the alliteration and assonance. So what are these? Alliteration, I told you, it is the repetition of the same sound, repetition of the consonant sound in the beginning of these words. Hopkins intensifies sound to heighten meaning and rhythm. So it makes, when you have this daylight's dolphin, depple dawn drawn, depple dawn drawn. So when you repeat these three sounds, da, 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 it intensifies the meaning of the line. It intensifies the message that the poet is trying to convey. And if you read his poems with a particular rhythm and with some kind of stress, if you maintain the intonation, they sound so beautiful. His poems sound so beautiful. Okay. You will then only you will get the feel of his poems. You have to read his poems aloud. Just silently reading his poems will not give you that feel. You have to read them aloud. You have to hear your own voice loudly. Okay. Hopkins intensifies sound to heighten meaning and rhythm. Alliteration, it is the repetition of initial consonant sounds. Initial consonant sounds. Just like depple, dawn, drawn. Fresh fire call, chestnut falls. Fall. These three sounds. Fresh fire call, chestnut falls. God's grandeur. There is a very famous poem by Hopkins where he celebrates the grandeur of God. How grand God is, how magnificent God is, how great God's creations are. And at the same time, he's also lamenting, or he's also sad that we don't have time to acknowledge God's creations or God's greatness. We are so busy with ourselves. We have exploited nature so much. So in this poem, we have this ecological or eco-critical undertones, because that's why Hopkins is also known as a precursor of eco-criticism that developed in the later century. Today, we have a very famous movement in literature. It is known as eco-criticism, where we talk about how nature and literature are related to each other, how literature can do something for the preservation of nature, and how we human beings have exploited nature, and what we can be done to stop that. Okay, and what role literature plays in bringing about that awareness amongst the readers about the necessity of the preservation of nature. So these are all different issues in eco-criticism. But in the 19th century, more than 100 years back, Hopkins had these ideas in his mind when there was no eco-criticism as a theory as such. But in his writings, we can see this eco-critical message. Okay, so God's grandeur. So there's an example from that poem. it will flame out like shining from shook foil. So flame from foil, these four sounds are repeated, and shining and shook, these two sure sounds are repeated. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. If alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds, assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. There's another example from the wind hour, where you have an example of assonance. Brood beauty. So brood oo sound, beauty oo sound. Brood beauty. Valor and act. Valor, act. A sound. Valor, act. Valor and act. Sound patterns mirror the subject's energy and beauty. Then you have natural imagery. Hopkins's poetry captures nature's vividness and divinity. So if you look at Hopkins's poems, basically Hopkins is a poet of nature and a poet of religion. Basically, Hopkins writes poems on nature and on spirituality. But there is a difference between Hopkins and the previous nature poets, because Hopkins is praising nature in the context of praising God. He's praising nature because he wants to praise God. So basically, his intention is to praise the creativity of God through nature. So he glorifies God through the celebration of nature. This is what makes Hopkins different from the other nature poets. So this is one, natural imagery. Hopkins's poetry captures nature's vividness and divinity. Symbolism, nature as a reflection of God's glory. And there's an example again from your poem, Pied Beauty. Glory be to God for dapple things. So although he's praising nature, but he wants to give the credit to whom? To God. That's why he starts the poem as glory be to God. So the focus remains on God. Here, the focus is on God. Glory be to God for, why glory be to God? For dappled things. So God is more important here, because whatever we have in nature is only because of God. God is behind everything. Glory be to God for dappled things. Highlights contrast in nature. Dappled things, contrasted things. Pied beauty itself, the title itself is variegated beauty, multicolored beauty, pied beauty, black, white. Okay, multicolored beauty. We have opposite things in nature. We have things in pairs, and we also have things in opposites. Pied beauty highlights contrasts in nature. Skies of couple color as a brinded cow. So he makes a comparison between the couple color of the sky with a brinded cow. Skies of couple color. If you look into the sky, now you will see a different color. In the evening time, again, you will see a different color. In the morning, you will see a different color. If the sky is clouded, again, the color will be different. If it is sunny, there is no cloud, again, the color will be different. So the sky of the color itself keeps on changing. So beautiful. If you observe the sky very minutely, you will see such beauty in the sky. So that is skies of couple color, as just like a brinded cow. Even a cow has a lot of beauty in its appearance. If you observe a cow beautifully, or like very minutely, you will see so much of beauty in the cow. Skies of couple color as a brinded cow. Binsey Poplars, there's another famous poem by Hopkins, Binsey Poplars, which is a poem on, which is an elegiac poem. It's an elegiac poem for fell trees. So again, I just told you that you will see this eco-critical undertones in his writings. So Binsey Poplar is another poem which we can look at as an eco-critical poem, because he's lamenting for the cutting of trees. Okay, this is something that is done in the 19th century. Lamenting humanity's disregard for nature, just like what he has said in God's Grandeur, that in Binsey Poplars also, is lamenting for our disregard for nature. Nature has so many things to give us. Nature has so much to give us, but in return, we haven't given anything to nature. Instead, we are exploiting nature. We are spoiling and exploiting nature, over-exploiting nature. Then he has religious themes. A strong Jesuit influence shapes his spiritual perspective. God's immanence present in all aspects of creation. God is present everywhere. Example again from God's grandeur. The world is charged, he said. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. So if you just look around everywhere in this world, you will see the grandeur of God. It is charged with, just like our mobile phone is charged. Why do we charge our mobile phones? To give it life. Otherwise, our mobile phone will die. Yeah, it will be out of charge and it will die. The battery will drain. So charging is what? It is giving some kind of life to it. It is making it lively. So the world is given life by God, by the grandeur of God. Okay? The world is charged with. So charge is, life is given to the world. At the same time, it is also full of the grandeur of God. Okay? The world is charged with the grandeur of God. Divine energy persists despite human degradation. And one thing Hopkins has said, even in the end of the poem, God's grandeur, however we try to like exploit nature, nature is never going to exhaust. God's creativity is so rich. God's creativity is so rich that we can never exhaust the resources of nature. That doesn't mean that we should try exhausting it, but God, he's trying to tell us that God's creativity is so rich. Okay. So if we do something from our bit for the preservation of nature, then nature is always there for us to help us and to heal us. Experimental syntax and diction. Hopkins restructured sentence patterns for dramatic effect. And syntax, inverted word order, and dense phrasing for emphasis. There's an example from Windhover. The achieve of. He doesn't say the achievement of. He has said the achieve of. Usually we don't say the achieve is a verb. We say achievement of something, but he has used it as a verb. He has used it as a noun. He has used the verb as a noun. The achieve of, the mastery of the thing. So this is restructured sentence pattern. Why this is done? To give some dramatic effect to his writing. So when you are focusing on dramatic effect, you are not focusing more on the like grammatical correctness and all. Okay. Diction, use of coined terms and archaisms for originality. So there are certain terms that he has coined himself, which you won't find in other poets. For example, words like apple, dawn, drawn. So this is very unique. Just like God's unique creations, Hopkins's creations are also very unique. So dapple, dawn, drawn, falcon. So this type of words we won't come across in other poets, especially of his time. World brood. This is another term that he has used. World brood. Visual imagery and color. Hopkins's poetry bursts with visual imagery and vibrant colors. Color imagery, there are a lot of color imagery. Even in Pied Beauty, you have so many colors in the poem. It's a very short poem. It's a cartel sonnet. It's a short poem. But in those few lines, you will see so many colors because the title itself is Pied Beauty. Pied. So when you say Pied Beauty, you have to feel that Pied Beauty in the poem, isn't it? So when you go through the poem, you will feel that, yes, this is really Pied Beauty. There are so many colors in it. There are so many varieties in it, varieties in God's creations. Hopkins's poetry bursts with visual imagery and vibrant colors. Gold and light symbolize divine presence. For example, in the poem, God's grandeur. Night and stars symbolize spiritual awe. There is another famous poem, The Starlight Night. Examples, the Windhover, the falcon as an image of grace and mastery. Pied Beauty, multicolored beauty in nature. So these are all about his visual imagery and color symbolism. Then he also has this paradox and contrast. Hopkins often juxtaposes opposites. He will say, things counter, all things counter, or all objects counter. Counter means what? Opposite to each other. He'll talk about darkness, and then he'll talk about light. He'll talk about day, then he'll talk about night. He'll talk about black, he'll talk about white. So he will contrast things to make them clear, to make things clearer. So often juxtaposes opposites to reflect divine complexity. So how complex divine creation can be. That is what he's trying to do here. For in example, pied beauty, you have these terms, na? Swift and slow, sweet and sour, adazzle and dim. Adazzle is dark, adazzle is light, dim is dark. Sweet and sour, swift, fast, slow. So opposite things. Tension creates dynamic and multi-layered meanings. So by juxtaposing opposite ideas, he also creates a tension in us. He also creates a tension in the readers of the minds of the readers to give a multi-layered meaning to his writings. Hopkins says eco-poetics. Hopkins was aware of human harm to the natural world. In Binse Poplars, he laments for the destruction of natural beauty, and also in the poem God's Grandeur, as I have already mentioned. And he also anticipates the contemporary ecological consciousness that I just mentioned, that what we call the eco-critical movement in literature. So eco-critical movement in literature was already anticipated by Hopkins during his times. During that time, we didn't have anything called eco-criticism. But today we feel how important Hopkins was as far as eco-critical writings are concerned. Okay, so he was way ahead of his times. Now, Hopkins and modernism. So many critics also refer to Hopkins as a modern poet. Although he is a late Victorian poet, but he is most of the times referred to as a modern poet because of his technical innovations in writing. Not because of the age to which he belonged, okay, that he belonged to, but because of his technical innovation in writing, for in sprung rhythm, for in scape, for in stress, he has been termed as a modern poet, a precursor to modernist experimentation with form and style, because this experimentation with form and style is generally done by the modernist poets. If you look at if you look at T.S. Eliot, if you look at W.B. Yeats, if you look at W.H. Auden, all these modern poets, they did these experimentations in style and form. But Hopkins is like a precursor to these modernist experimentations in form and style. Influence on poets like T.S. Eliot, W.H. Auden, and Dylan Thomas. Hopkins's themes of alienation and fate resonate with modernist concerns. And if you look at modernist poems like, for example, W.B. Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium, if you look at T.S. Eliot's very famous poem, The Wasteland, okay, these poems are all about modernist concerns, modernist problems. But you will also see that this sense of alienation and fate of the modernist concerns are also found in the writings of Hopkins. Hopkins's legacy now, initially ignored due to unconventional style, rediscovered and celebrated in the 20th century. And even today also we are celebrating Hopkins's writings. A bridge between Victorian and modernist poetry. So if you look at his role as a poet, he is just like a bridge that connects the Victorian and the modernist poets. He is a bridge, he's a connection between the two. Okay. In more recent times, Gerard Manley Hopkins's poetry has been embraced as a precursor to modern environmental literature. His deep reverence for nature and his belief in the interconnectedness of all living things resonate with contemporary environmental concerns. This is what we call eco-criticism. As the world faces growing environmental challenges, Hopkins' celebration of the beauty of the natural world and his call for responsible stewardship of the earth hold particular significance. In conclusion, Gerard Manley Hopkins remains a poet of immense artistic and spiritual significance. His unique poetic style, the profound exploration of nature and fate, and his ability to convey the depths of human emotion continue to inspire readers and fellow poets alike. So this is the today's lecture. Hopkins redefined poetic form through sprung rhythm and unique soundscapes like Inscape and In Stress. Inscape and In Stress reveals a profound spiritual vision, and his works explore the interplay of nature, fate, and human emotion. So that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your
Welcome,
insightful
sir.
talk. Now, I would like to request Dr. Sonam Samazdar if you have any questions or if you have anything to say, sir, please.
আমি খুব শিওর নই যে দীপক বাংলা জানে কিনা। দীপক
স্যার
বাংলা বোঝো?
আমি আমি
আচ্ছা
বুঝতে
আচ্ছা
পারি স্যার অল্প।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা। লাইক খুব সুন্দর লাগলো শুনে। It
ধন্যবাদ
was
স্যার।
very beautifully presented,
থ্যাংক ইউ সো
and
মাচ।
it was on one hand
স্যার
sometimes erudite and sometimes very student friendly, so that will benefit our students and college teachers
স্যার
much.
Sir,
So
yeah, I just kept that in mind that my
yeah,
students
yeah,
like
I
my
know, I
focus
know.
was always on the students.
We
Yeah.
teachers become teachers everywhere, even on a railway coach or a flight.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
so that
Our
that's
students
very
should always be benefited.
for
Our
this
priority.
for this function.
Yes,
I
sir.
would like to congratulate you because
Thank you so much, sir.
sometimes I hear special lectures in
Yes.
which the signifier special becomes more important than the the signifier lecture. But you have kept in your mind that lecture
Thank you
is
so
what
much.
you have to deliver to a community, and a community with communication. That was what I would congratulate you. And I
Thank you so
rarely
much, sir.
listen to, I am confessing, a full
Thank you, sir.
lecture. But this time I sat through and listened, first and foremost because of the quality of the lecture, and secondly because the
Thank you so much.
object or the ontology of the lecture,
Thank you, sir.
Hopkins, is
Thank you.
amazing. I would just want to say this is absolutely again my stress and my escape,
Thank you so much,
that
sir.
being a believer somewhere in Marxian philosophies, I find modernism to be a very shallow movement,
Yes, sir.
because it reduced heterogeneity into a
Yes.
re-hierarchization. For example, if blood begotten souls would wander everywhere in a centrifuge, that will create a kind of lumpen proletarianism. And that's why in Byzantium city, in the emperor's pavement, they have to go through a fire homogenization.
Yes, sir.
Hopkins resisted this. So I would suggest, and I would insist, from my perspective, you are, of course, able to differ, that Hopkins is not only a proto-modernist, but
Yes, sir.
Hopkins is Victorian age's first postmodern utterer. His
Utterer.
enunciations,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
his enunciations were postmodern, which would
Yes.
celebrate difference and uniqueness.
Yes,
He
sir.
would believe in the essence of the inside of the inside of the inside of a signifier. So he would
Heterogeneity.
insist that for stable, eco-critical or Christian harmony of this world, there is a necessity of anchoring the difference into some kind of uniqueness or essence, but he would never believe in essentialism as modernists used to do.
Yes, sir.
That
Yeah,
that is
you're
what I
semi-right.
would like to comment. খুব
Yeah.
ভালো বলেছো। হ্যাঁ, তোমার
Thank you, sir.
মাতৃভাষা কি?
Sir, Assamese.
আচ্ছা, আমি আসামিস ভুলে গিয়েছি অনেকদিন, কুচবিহারে থাকা সত্ত্বেও। আমি যেহেতু শিলিগুড়িতে থাকি, এখন আমি
Sir, I
নেপালিস
have a lot
বলতে
of
পারি
Bengali friends, so I little bit I can understand Bengali. But
না
I'm
না,
not
খুব
that good in
খুব
like.
সুন্দর লেগেছে। my congratulations, my gratitude
so much,
as
sir.
the head of the department and DRC chairperson, and
Thank you so much.
also my blessings as a very senior dada. Go
Thank you so
ahead in
much, sir.
life and carry on
And, sir, I
lectures
hope
like
today
this.
that we'll meet very soon, sir, in person.
Yeah, we will meet.
Yes, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have with us Dr. Joydeep Sarkar from BT Evening College. Sir, if you would like to say something, please.
I am actually in examination hall. Hello.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Actually, examination is going on, and I am in the examination hall. But I have heard every beat of the lecture, and I am enlightened. Shunak has sufficiently evaluated the speech, and my thanks to Dr. Doley, and my thanks to all of you of the CPB University who has arranged such a lecture and has given us a chance to interact with you. We will surely meet in person and then we will discuss. Do I am in
জয়দীপ
examination hall
স্যার,
also? Yeah,
জয়দীপ স্যার,
bolo.
বলছি তুমি এক্সামিনেশন হলে বেশি ইন্স্ট্রেস করো না, বাচ্চাগুলোকে একটু লিখতে দিও।
না না না, একদম দিচ্ছি, একদম দিচ্ছি। ঠিক আছে, আমি 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 ভাবিনি যে পুরোটা শোনার সুযোগ পাবো আর কি, বাট স্টিল পুরোটাই শুনে ফেললাম। আর লাস্ট তো হপকিন্স পড়া হয়েছিল মাস্টার্স ডেসে, তারপর আর পড়া হয়নি। হ্যাঁ, আর এই কবিতাগুলোই সব ভালোই লাগলো।
Thank you, sir.
থ্যাংক ইউ
Now
স্যার।
I'd like to invite the research scholars of the department and the students from the department. If you have any questions, any queries, you're welcome. Please. Rezwan, Shubroto, Bhaktinath, Papia, if you have any questions, please. Yes, Bhakti.
সেমিনার চলছে, যখন বলেছে একটু থাকতে, হ্যাঁ চালিয়ে দিয়ে আর কি।
Yes. Yeah. As I like mentioned that because he became a man of like religion, he became a Jesuit priest. So he believed that to be a poet is like it's all about personal fame, and he believed that being a man of religion, he should never go after personal fame. So he even burned most of his manuscripts. That's a very tragic. That's a tragic fact for us. He burned many of his manuscripts, but still we have his poems being posthumously published by his friend Robert Bridges. Just this ideological, like he believed that being a man of religion, we are not supposed to go after personal fame.
Uh, I would I would like to add a few information to it.
Yes,
Exactly said by Dipak. Or দীপক বললাম, হ্যাঁ কিছু মনে করো না, ডোন্ট
Yeah,
গেট
no, no,
অফেন্ডেড।
no problem.
So, and the you know one of the epistemic cuts in that era in the domain of faith, knowledge, and utterance was the conversion of Cardinal Newman. And this was the era of uncertainty. आप टेनिसन का पोएम में भी देख सकते हो सब,
There is uncertainty.
ब्राउनिंग का पोएम में भी देख सकते हो. Criminology and love, criminology and law, faith and religion, there's always a kind of a binary opposition in that age. This was the age that was going through unrest, and therefore, correctly said by our special lecturer today, the age of unrest, the age
Unrest.
of unsurety. Now, in search of certitudes, movements were going on. Methodist to Anglican, Anglican to Protestant, Protestant to, again, in case of Newman, Catholic conversions. These were going on. Now, what happens is that in a post-romantic era, even an age which is seeing its first 34 years under the discursive pressure of romanticism, in which nature would never betray the heart that loves it. इस सेंटेंस का पीछे कोई faith है. There is a search for faith, and in this search for faith, even the most extreme innovators, even today, would not be able to always convert ventilations for his expressions into publicized world because he was not a professional author. So this has to be also kept in mind. There are lots of silent poets around us even today, and there are lots of silent spiritualists among us even today who are not sonorous about the glory of their achievement. And that is what keeps literature alive, nature alive, and I would say faith alive.
Thank you, sir, for your deliberations. Now I would like to ask the research scholars and the students, if you have any questions, please, you are welcome. Any questions from the audience? Papia Das, Subroto. So, sir, I guess they don't have any questions. But, sir, I would like to ask you one thing. If you could just suggest us one or two books on the poetry of Hopkins, how to understand him for a better interpretation of him. If you could suggest us a few, that
I
would be
have
helpful.
whatever I prepared. I have a bibliography of that. I'll share it with you later when WhatsApp.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
I'll
sir.
share the list. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So now I would like to formally conclude today's program by extending the vote of thanks. Being the convener of the program, it is a matter of utter privilege and honor for me to deliver the vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude and regards to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nikhil Chandra Roy of Coach Bihar Panjabama University, for allowing us to organize a special lecture program in virtual mode. I'm very much indebted to Dr. Dilip Devnath, the officiating registrar of this university, for his continuous support. I'm immensely grateful to Dr. Dipak Kumar Doley, the resource person of today's special lecture program, for his very enlightening talk along with a very insightful presentation. I'm thankful to Dr. Shonak Samazdar, head of the Department of English, for his cooperation and guidance. I convey my gratefulness to my fellow colleagues by the names of Professor Joyita Sengupta and Dr. Shaktipada Kumar for their support. I'm also thankful to Dr. Abhijit Dakto, the system administrator of Coach Bihar Panjabama University, for lending his hand. And finally, I would like to appreciate the presence of research scholars and the students of the Department of English of Coach Bihar Panjabama University. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
I'm
so much.
getting off. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.